The envelope was thick and cream-colored, the kind that felt expensive before you even looked at it, with raised lettering that read, Thorn and Vale, Attorneys at Law. Beneath it sat my name, Miss Irena Reyes, printed in an elegant black script. That didn't belong to anything casual. I held it for a breath longer than necessary, already knowing what waited inside. No one had told me. I felt it the morning Grandpa died, like an old hinge finally giving up the ghost. Over breakfast, my mother delivered the news with her usual clipped certainty. Grayson's will is being read next week. It's a formality. Selena is the primary beneficiary. Don't trouble yourself dressing up for disappointment. I didn't answer. I had learned that offering words to her was like dropping coins into a bottomless well. Nothing came back. The letter matched her report, time, date, location, and then a line that snagged at me. You have been named among the interested parties. I set the envelope by my coffee and watched the steam drift into it. I could hear my father even before his mouth moved in memory. Don't humiliate yourself by showing up for a thing you were never part of. They didn't mean to be cruel, not in their minds, but disbelief leaves a sharper welt than a slap. I wasn't the favorite. I wasn't Selena. I never had been. Still, I thought about Grandpa's porch, about the day he set a worn book on my knees and said, "The ones who sit beside you without requiring noise, those are the ones who last." It wasn't about whatever he left behind. Not really. I expected no checks, no plaques, no applause. Even so, I folded the letter, slid it into my coat pocket, and circled the date. Maybe I wasn't supposed to matter in that room. I would be there anyway. When we were kids, our house hummed with Selena's name as though it had been stitched into the wallpaper. Selena got first chair. Selena's teacher says she's gifted. Selena's audition was flawless. Our parents spoke about her like she was already a headline. Everything she touched turned to something gleaming. I didn't begrudge her shine. I just learned the topography of shadows. While she smiled under lights and posed with program notes, I found the back steps with a paperback, the garage with Grandpa's puzzle boxes that smelled like cedar and dust. Once, our mother caught me reading at the table and said, "Try joining the world for once." I did. It slid off me like rain on a waxed coat. I was never loud enough, never impressive enough, never enough of her. Grandpa never asked for volume. He pressed small things into my palm, a tarnished compass, a hairline cracked, globe, a folded trail map he swore he'd hike someday. "See where this takes you," he'd say. I'd spend afternoons tracing dotted lines through places I couldn't pronounce, feeling strangely at home in the act of imagining. He never called me special. He didn't need to. The last time I saw him was an early October Sunday. I brought a tin of tea from a shop downtown, bergamot and dried orange peel, the lid clicking shut like a secret. He made 2 mugs without asking what I preferred, and we sat on the porch while leaves cartwheeled across the yard. We were quiet, the kind of quiet that feels like a blanket, not a wall. No one knew I went. There were no photos, no captions, no performance. He didn't mention his will. He didn't provide a single instruction. When I stood to leave, he squeezed my hand. "You show up without needing to be seen," he said. "That's rarer than people think." It stuck, not because it was praise, but because it opened a door I hadn't realized I was allowed to walk through. Now, with a plain black dress spread on the bed and a coat with 2 missing buttons folded on top, I didn't feel deserving or chosen. I didn't feel like anyone's heir. Something quieter pressed at me, an insistence that I needed to be in that room, not for them, not even for me. For him. The chapel crowned a low hill, its stone walls holding on to the frost. I arrived just before the service. My wool coat still smelled faintly of cedar. The wind snapped at my fingers as I slipped inside and shook the cold from my sleeves. Selena was already in place, poured into a silk sheath, her heels too brave for winter. People orbited her like she was the widow and not the granddaughter. She either didn't see me or chose not to. I nodded at the usher. "Here for Grayson Reyes." He hesitated, then pointed toward the side aisle. "You can sit there." The pews were crowded with faces I knew by outline, a neighbor with a stern bun, old colleagues from the firm, cousins who traded holiday niceties. My parents held court in the second row. Selena sat beside them, leaning in as my mother breathed something into her ear. I found a seat near the back by the window. No one joined me. Someone behind me whispered, "Why is she here?" Another answered, "Didn't she cut them off years ago?" I didn't turn. The murmurs rushed past like cold air under a door. Unpleasant, familiar. The urn rested at the front, small and dark, and not at all like the man who had taught me how to fold a map. A photograph stood beside it. Grandpa in front of the cabin, gloved hands, an almost smile. The hymn meant nothing to my mouth. The Yah. Pastor talked about legacies and assurances, but my eyes stayed soft on the picture. I thought about the porch. Grief is odd. After the service, Selena swept into the adjoining room like she'd been booked. The coat draped across her arm, the small clutch swinging, she lowered her voice just enough to call it private and just enough so I could hear. "This is ceremony," she said to no one and everyone. Grandpa knew who deserved what. My parents settled beside her. My mother wore that thin-lipped expression she kept for weddings and courtrooms, polished pride and performance. I chose the chair closest to the window, away from their cluster. Mr. Thorne entered carrying a file under his arm. He greeted us with a small nod, sat, and opened the folder. "Thank you for coming. I'll begin the formal reading of the last will and testament of Grayson Elias Reyes, dated June 12th of last year." Selena crossed her legs, chin tilted, a smile ready for the confirmation she expected. "To my granddaughter Selena Reyes," Mr. Thorne read, "I leave the Aspen Chalet, all furnishings contained therein, and the sum of $300,000 to be dispersed within 60 days of probate." Selena's smile widened, not shock so much as a goal met. She glanced at our parents. Both gave her the curt nod reserved for inevitability. Mr. Thorne turned a page. The air prickled. Something almost imperceptible like the room had taken a breath and forgot to let it go. Selena's smirk nudged in my direction, as if to say, "There, see?" My mother didn't look at me. The silence moved toward its conclusion. This is where my name fails to appear, I thought. A courtesy invitation. Nothing else. I folded my hands and waited. Mr. Thorne cleared his throat. "And to Irina Reyes," he said. The words settled like a soft weight on the table. I felt my pulse leap, but I didn't move. He adjusted his glasses. "To my granddaughter, Irina Reyes, I bequeath controlling interest in Reyes Development, along with $53.5 million in personal and investment assets." The sounds arranged themselves in the air and hovered there, as if waiting to decide whether they belonged to reality. Quiet, stretched thin. Selena blinked once, twice. "What?" she said, as if the syllable might rip the paragraph apart. My mother made a small, strangled noise. My father leaned back like something heavy had landed in his chest. No one turned toward me. Mr. Thorne kept his cadence steady. "This includes 62% ownership of all corporate entities, voting authority on the board of directors, and full discretion over future leadership and asset allocation." Selena shot to her feet. The chair scraped the hardwood. "That's a mistake." Mr. Thorne didn't flinch. "It isn't. Your grandfather made these revisions in person. The documents were witnessed and notarized. He was of sound mind." My hands remained folded. My heart thudded, trying to outrun the news. "He never said anything," Selena snapped. "He barely spoke about her. He didn't even like her." Mr. Thorne closed the file with care. "He left one addendum for the family." He lifted a single sheet and for the first time dropped the legal tone. She was the only one who showed up without a camera. Silence again, this time heavy with recognition we had not planned for. Selena's face emptied. Not rage yet, only disbelief. My mother's mouth hung open, as if denial had been caught mid-stride. My father studied me, really looked, not with softness, but with attention. I didn't think about the money or the boardroom or the leverage waiting in those numbers. I thought about the porch, the book on my lap, the kettle's sigh. I thought about that Sunday I never offered as evidence because I hadn't needed to prove anything to anyone. Selena found her voice. "This isn't fair." I met her gaze, level. It wasn't meant to be. Mr. Thorne stood, collecting the documents into a neat stack. There's one more item. A personal letter addressed to you, Ms. Reyes. He held out a sealed envelope. My grandfather's handwriting papered the front. Steady, slightly formal. I slipped it into my coat pocket. I knew I'd open it, just not under fluorescent lights. I waited until evening, until I'd returned to the small motel off the highway where the heater rattled and the curtains never quite met in the center. I sat on the bed with the envelope in my lap and traced the capital I of my name before breaking the seal. 3 pages, neatly folded. No date, no salutation beyond my name. Irina, you never asked me for anything, and yet you gave me what I wanted most. Time without an agenda. I watched you grow up in the corners of a house too loud to hear you. They tally love by applause. You know it by presence, the Sunday you brought tea, you didn't announce it. You just sat. No one knew, you never told them. That was enough for me. I paused, breath hitching. The air thinned, as if he'd found a chair across from me and was saying nothing in the way that meant everything. I changed my will the following week, not out of spite. I love Selena too in the shape I can. But she stayed only when lenses were pointed her way. She memorized the story of my legacy without learning the part that mattered, the patience it took to build it. You once asked why I keep the maps and journals. You didn't laugh when I said I like knowing where things have been so I can better guess where they're going. I smiled despite myself. I could hear him, practical and gently superstitious. Do what you want with the company. Keep it, sell it, rename it. What I'm leaving you isn't concrete. It's trust. Trust that the person who arrives quietly, without needing to be seen, is the one I want holding the light when everyone else forgets where the switch is. The final lines leaned slightly right, the loops larger. They will tell you don't deserve this. I've witnessed what the world rewards, and I've watched what it overlooks. I choose to remember you. Love, Grandpa. I folded the pages along their original creases and slid them back into the envelope, then tucked it under my pillow like a talisman. It wasn't vindication that washed through me. It was recognition, soft and firm, like stepping off glass and finding ground. I returned to the firm the next morning for signatures. Mr. Thorne had asked me to come alone. When I stepped into the waiting area, they were already assembled. My parents and Selena, posed like a portrait none of them had agreed to sit for. Selena stood the instant she saw me. You manipulated him. Each word precise, honed, rehearsed. He was old. He didn't know what he was doing. I let the accusation settle. I looked at her face, immaculate makeup, perfect blouse, grief ironed into indignation. I don't need to make a case, I said. I loved him. Her mouth twisted. Don't pretend this is about love. He was my grandfather too. I nodded. Then you know he didn't care for cameras. My mother flinched. My father's eyes dropped to the rug. Mr. Thorne appeared in the doorway, voice even. For clarity, Mr. Reyes underwent 2 independent cognitive evaluations before amending his will. Both confirmed full competency. His instructions were explicit. That doesn't make it right, Selena snapped. No, I said. It makes it his choice. My mother broke, quietly, not theatrical, just tears gathering as she turned away. My father placed a hand on her shoulder, a gesture that didn't land. Selena collected her bag with sharp movements. This isn't over, she said, though her center had shifted. You don't get to rewrite the family because he's gone. I didn't answer. I didn't have to. She left, heels cutting the by. Haul into small, loud pieces. Mr. Thorne inclined his head toward the office. Just a few signatures. I followed, the envelope warm against my chest. Whatever storm had blown through, I was still here. Not untouched. Unshaken. The drive to the cabin took under 2 hours. Snow worried the shoulders of the road, a whisper that winter was thinking about it. The turns returned to my hands like a language I'd once spoken. The tilt of the mailbox, the pitch of the evergreens, the little leap of gravel under the tires as I eased up the drive. The key turned without complaint. Inside, time had not imposed anything. The pine table. The threadbare throw over the armchair. The shelf of books leaning left as always. Dust made a film of gentleness over everything. On the mantel above the cold hearth stood a photograph. I stopped breathing for a second. Me, 10 years old, cross-legged, on the porch step, reading with my back against Grandpa's knee, his hand on my shoulder. Both of us looking at the same page. I hadn't known the picture existed. Beside it, a small leather journal. I opened it, careful with the spine. His handwriting slanted, deliberate. Irina was never loud. That's how I knew I could trust her. Air left me as if I'd been holding it for a decade. I sank into the armchair with the journal in my lap and let the quiet collect around me. Not heavy, whole. After a long while, I placed logs into the fireplace and struck a match. The flame caught and grew with unhurried confidence. I watched the shape of heat take the room, listened to the wood's gentle adjustments. For the first time in longer than I could measure, I felt no need to explain myself to anyone. The light leveled across the floor. I sat there, feeling the weight of the letter, the photograph, and everything I'd been given. No longer as burden, but as something else entirely. A beginning.